solar power, invest in technology that allows our community colleges and technical colleges to develop new ideas for how we meet our country's energy needs. And in Kansas, even in Johnson County, I would say we should be building a coal-fired plant that our governor at the time didn't allow to have happen. I am very surprised by the nature of how the state of Kansas responded to this. What I would have thought we would have said is, yes, but let's do it right. Let's make sure that it's environmentally sound, as compared to no, no, no. We ought to be encouraging Kansas to be the role model in developing energy in ways that are beyond what we have today. And so I generally think that the economy recovers when people across the board, whether they're 25 to 40 years old or not, have the opportunity to invest in their own business, can afford to take care of their own families, and in doing so, put other people to work. And so that's a tax code that encourages the investment in job creation. It's a tax code and an education environment that encourages people to develop new skills and new technologies. Again, I think we need to be very careful when we simply think that government is the answer to our problems. In most instances, in many instances, let me say that, it works the other way. Yes, sir.
Congressman, I want to believe. And can't hear you. From
He's saying he wants to win.
I want to win. From 1995 to 2007, we controlled the House. We had the Senate a similar time frame. We had the presidency from 01 to 09. You're going to have to combat when you're on the trail, and Republicans across the country are going to have to combat on the trail, that this notion that we're going to be fiscally responsible now is just convenient. It's naked politics and nothing else. Because they'll say, you had your chance, and we had this many trillion in deficits. What's your response going to be?
Well, first of all, it isn't, as I said earlier, Republicans fail to behave like Republicans. The one thing I knew about being a Republican growing up in Plainville, Kansas, is the thing that differentiated us, we were for smaller government, less spending, less growth of government, and we didn't see evidence of that in Washington, D.C. The annoying thing about that, it now gives the Obama administration the opportunity to blame all of their problems. They inherited these problems. I think it's interesting to go back and look at President Obama's voting record in the Senate. He voted for everything that would grow government, spend more money, but he's blaming Republicans and the administration for problems. Yes, there is some blame to go there, but it ought not be something that allows President Obama and his administration to get off the hook. What I tell people is that I have worked hard at being a fiscal conservative, whether it was Republicans' proposal to spend money, grow the government, and increase the debt, or Democrat proposals. And my examples of that, again, I think that the administration, the Bush administration, led us down a path and unbecoming of Republicans. And the Speaker of the House, Speaker Hastert, I remember the conference in which he told us that the number one priority of us as Republicans in the House was to make sure we passed whatever the president wanted. That's not the function of the House. It's not necessarily the function of Republicans. It's to make a decision about what is the right answer and what's the wrong answer. And what I would tell Kansans is that I voted against the prescription drug benefit, for example. The largest increase in the entitlement benefits in our country's history was done during Republican days. And while I think maybe there could be a prescription drug benefit under Medicare, this one was developed in a way that I think benefited seniors in the least way possible for the most amount of money, and above all that, we did next to nothing to pay for it. In the size of growing government, I voted against No Child Left Behind. That's an intrusion. Education is so important to us that it ought not be decided in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Education. It ought to be decided here in Kansas at local boards of education, parents, school districts, Topeka. But this is a huge increase. Again, President Bush's #1 legislative priority of the year was to pass No Child Left Behind. And if we have problems in education, my best guess is the solution does not come from Washington, D.C. It comes from parents paying attention to what's going on in the school system at home. I actually voted against the Department of Homeland Security, its creation. There were only 8 of us who did that. 189,000 people went to work at the Department of Homeland Security. That's going to make us safer. We created a bureaucracy. So just time and time again, we have done things that make no sense. I agree with you that we have a credibility gap as Republicans in trying to make certain, what we're doing, you're never in a good position when you say, believe me this time. That never is a good sentence to have out of your mouth, but I would tell you that it is my impression in watching my colleagues in Congress that they have learned a lesson. These elections sent them a message that we're we didn't do it right. And I think, you see a number of instances in which Republicans have voted no, in some instances with unanimity, that's not the right word, with unanimous, in a unanimous way, and in others in which we lose just a couple of those New England Republicans, although they're almost not with us anymore in the House of Representatives anyway. So it is an unfortunate circumstance. This is the thing, I don't know that I finished my thought. When I grew up in Plainville, Kansas, the one thing I knew about Republicans was that we're the party that is supposed to be fiscally responsible, and we, in my opinion, demonstrated the hypocrisy of that sentence in the time that we were in control. Yes, ma'am.
You're saying all the right things that we want to hear, and you've been going to all these meetings, and evidently they've been well received. What I want to know about HR 3200, what strategies are you going to implement when you go back to counter that?
Well,
I mean, are you going to be setting up meetings with the other Republicans? I mean, it has to be countered. What specific thing are you going to be doing, because you're outnumbered?
right. We face a difficult circumstance. We face a bill that has, in my opinion, damaging consequences to America, but it's supported strongly by an administration, a president and an administration, and the Democrats have significant majorities in the House. It wouldn't surprise me but what something similar to what we have in H.R. 3200 is passed by the House. In part, I say that because I've not seen Speaker Pelosi lose a battle yet. One would have thought that would have happened on cap and trade, for example. I thought John Boehner, our minority leader, did an awfully good job of reading the 300-page amendment, and I would have thought a normal person, which must exclude members of the House of Representatives, reaction to that would have been, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was in there. Or, oh my gosh, I wonder what else is in there. But no, it's just, it passes, which causes me to have the concern that Speaker Pelosi will have the ability once again to deliver an even more damaging bill, 3200. But your question is, what are we doing? I think Republicans, I'm always tired of the criticism that Republicans just say no. In this case, we ought to say no. But beyond that, I do think it's important that the Republicans have a plan, that we espouse, so we believe in something and we're trying to tell the American people. And there are about 4 Republican plans that are out there, and I think it's important that we narrow ourselves to one that we can generally have consensus on as Republicans and can go out and talk about it. But again, when Democrats say we just say no and why don't Republicans offer something constructive, I will tell you that there isn't a Republican that's ever invited, maybe there's a couple from New England again, who are invited to ever meet with the Speaker for a suggestion, to suggest that this is what we're supposed to do. Again, I'm not at all suggesting we ought to reach this compromise in which we kind of go halfway down this path. But Republicans ought to stand for something. They ought to espouse their views and tell you what they think ought to happen with health care. A problem with that is, again, the Democrat leaders are not interested in our opinion. But 2, our opportunity is the American people. Even Democrats listen to the American people from time to time. And we need to be, there is no media outlet that gives us great access to the American people. It has become talk radio, but in many instances we end up talking to ourselves. It's the internet, but in many instances we end up communicating with ourselves. And so, I mean, what I'm doing personally is I'm trying to figure out how you get on Kansas City radio. I'm trying to figure out, I'm writing more op-eds, opinion pieces for newspapers, for people to read at least what I think are the answers to this. I'm speaking more on the House floor, even when it's just C-SPAN, the after-hours stuff, but I'm taking the opportunity to go to the House floor on a much more regular basis to talk about cap and trade, for example, to try to make certain that my constituents, that Kansans know, here's how this guy feels. And if they agree, great. If they don't, then my guess is the phone calls come, the emails come, and I'll learn something. Now, I think it's important for a member of Congress to express their view and to try to bring America along, but the reality is America's ahead of us. America's figured this out before members of Congress did. And so I think the answer to your question is what's happening. Americans are out there talking about this. Republicans are figuring out, oh, this is an issue that matters to Americans. We're going to tell this story in a better way, in a more consistent way, and we're going to try to come up with the set of talking points that brings us all together. Whether that happens or not. See, people ask me, what's the reaction in Washington, D.C.?